Good morning, everybody. We are here on June 1st, 2021, and this is Ingwe Immigration's live question answer regarding any matters related to Canadian immigration. Today is June 1st, Tuesday. It's a beautiful summer day. I mean, we're still officially in spring, but in Canada, you have to appreciate the weather as much as you can. And we're here to answer all of your questions related to Canadian immigration. So whether you're asking about studying in Canada, whether you want to sponsor your children or your partner or your spouse, or whether you're inside of Canada, you're not sure about how to apply for something, we're here to Happy June. Yes, somebody, one of our favorite members here says Happy June. Yes, it is Happy June, everybody. Happy June Tuesday. And again, we're Ingwe Immigration based out of Toronto, Canada, helping clients all across Canada, Latin America, Central America, Middle East, Africa, Asia, Southeast Asia. So what we're going to do today is go over some questions that some of our colleagues have sent us previously and some of our clients, but you can post your own questions here on the session. We're here live on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. So sometimes when there's a question on one of the platforms, I'll read it out loud and everybody can see. So right now we had some questions that some of our colleagues had sent basically from the clients. And before anybody posts any questions, hello, Golden Dream Immigration. I'm going to answer these as well. So one person is asking, can I come to Canada to start studying and then get a PR after graduation if I am self-employed? So if you're self-employed overseas, that counts as experience, work experience. When you come to Canada, if you work inside of Canada self-employed, most programs won't allow it, especially express entry, but there are one or two specific programs which allow self-employed. But in general, Canadian work experience self-employed is very tricky, and most 98% of programs don't allow it. There's two programs that allow self-employed. One is basically the self-employed category, which is for art, cultural, and athletic occupations, world-class level. Second one is there's 3 provinces which allow entrepreneurial self-employed graduates to start their own business. And plus, you can also do the investor work permits, which are the ICT, intra-company transfer, owner-operator. But again, you won't gain work experience points under express entry in those. So that's one key thing. So we're looking at some questions here. Somebody said, Said El Nasser is asking, I want to work in Canada. Well, you have to come either be sponsored by an employer to work in Canada, right? So an employer has to give you a job offer. 2, another option is you or your spouse study in Canada. If your spouse or partner studies, you have the ability to apply for a work permit inside of Canada to work full-time as a spouse or partner of a full-time international student. So that those are 2 ways. There's some other ways you can do it, but typically what we see is you either get a sponsor through an employer, or your spouse or partner is a full-time worker or international student, and you're allowed to obtain a work permit as long as you're not studying languages like a pathway or ELI, like English or French. As long as it's an academic program, or your spouse or partner is actually working full-time. That's another way, in a NOC 0A or B. If you don't know what a NOC is, send us a message through our website. We'd be happy to explain that to you. So another question we had is, how is the working hours in the pay slip counted? So if one of my pay slips shows 59 hours for 2 weeks, is it still considered full-time, counted as pay slip? So that means This person is getting paid every 2 weeks, and on the payslip it shows that they've worked 59 hours. So if you split 59 hours equally across 2 weeks, that's less than 30 hours a week. It's not considered 100% full-time, but it's pretty close. And in most categories of work experience, it allows you to gain partial work experience inside of Canada, whether part-time or full-time. So if you're looking at TR to PR pathway, if you're looking at express entry, they allow Canadian work experience to be partially accumulated, even if it's part-time or a combination of part-time and full-time. So whether you work 60 hours in 2 weeks or 59, if you're inside of Canada, it doesn't really matter. It's not as significant for those two programs. Let's see what other questions we have. So somebody's asking us about, can you tell your opinion in the post about the new chance for 90,000 essential workers and graduates to be extended? So that means basically the new TR to PR pathway. Many clients and applicants and people inside of Canada are asking, will that program be extended or renewed or reopened? There's a high probability. So the Canadian government is monitoring how many applications they're receiving now through express entry, through the TR to PR pathway. And if they don't meet their 400,000 target of new permanent residents inside of Canada by end of 2021, then yes, they will very likely extend, renew, reopen. However, whether it's for 90,000 or 10,000, they will look at those numbers at that time. We expect express entry points to drop for Canadian experience class. So if you're outside of Canada and you're in the express entry system and you don't have Canadian work experience, then it's very unlikely you will be selected this year, no matter how many points you have. So even if you have 490, 470, you would have to wait till 2022 to look at opportunities. If you have Canadian work experience and you could be inside or outside of Canada, your work experience is in the last 3 years, that's when you have the best chance of actually obtaining your permanent residency through the express entry system. Because right now, if you watch, it's dropping to 380. We expect the points to drop to low 300s by the end of this year. So if you're in the express entry and you have 340, 50, 60, even 330 or 21, I think that's the magic number. I think anybody with over 320 this year in terms of Canadian experience in express entry will have a great chance of being invited for permanent residency. So some other questions. So folks, the way it works right now is you can post your question here, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. We'd be happy to answer you. I am in our office today, FYI, in Toronto. So you can post your questions and we'd be happy to answer them live. We're here every Tuesday. And no question is too obvious. So don't worry if your question is just like, oh, I think this is a dumb question. There is no such thing. Immigration is relatively tricky. So ask anything you like. Don't worry about what people think, and we will answer all the questions there are. So there's some other questions. Why is my study gap so important? So when you're applying for a study permit from outside of Canada, and you want to come and study in Canada, and if you do need a visa, like a study permit to study, in most cases you do, people are asking, why is it important that my graduation from my last degree was 6 years ago, 2 years ago, or 20 years ago? Well, when the Canadian embassy looks at your study permit application, they're going to look at what is the gap. That means if you graduated 10 years ago, what were you doing in these 10 years? How come you suddenly decided to come and study in Canada? And that's a red flag. So that means that's a negative point for you. Okay. So it depends on your nationality, right? So if you're from Brazil and you have a valid US visa, I don't think there's any issues. But if you're coming from Middle East, Asia, Africa, or other Latin American countries where the refusal rates are higher, If your education gap is 6 years or more, that means from your last graduation, that will be a negative. If you just graduated fresh out of high school, or you just graduated from your bachelor's and you're coming over for a postgraduate, then that's good. So if your gap is 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, even up to 5 years, it's possible. But as soon as the gap increases, the chances of getting a study permit drop. But this for countries like Europeans or Mexicans, Brazilians, where you don't really need a visa to come in as a visitor, getting a study permit, even with a larger education gap, is not a problem. So don't worry about that. So we have some questions here. Alex is asking, is the non-essential worker public policy still open? Yes, it's still open. I believe we were at 9,000, we were close to 10,000. So I checked about 1 or 2 days ago, it was close to 10,000. So what we'll do right now is TR to PR pathway. Well, I'll give you an updated number. I know the essential workers, health workers were a lot. So essential non-healthcare workers right now is 11,229 applications received out of 30,000. So you have approximately, I believe, 18,700, I don't know, my math isn't great, 700 something, 80, maybe 70 spots left. For the healthcare workers, there's over 18,300, 62 spots left. And the international student stream for English applicants is closed. Any of these applications, if you're a French speaker and you have a French score like TEF or TCF, is open until November 5th, 2021. Okay, so it's unlimited caps. But yes, non-essential workers, public policy is still open. It is essential, actually, so it's not non-essential, it's actually essential. So Atil, how do you pronounce that name? Attila Zenozi is asking, I was a PhD student and switched to a master's degree. Both programs have at least 2 years. How many years will my postgraduate work permit be? Well, typically if it's 18 months or longer in terms of studies, then it will be 3 years, okay? So it doesn't matter if you study 10 years, 3 years, 2 years, or 5 years, as long as you're a full-time student during your studies, your postgraduate work permit will be 3 years, as long as the studies you've done are in an eligible designate like school, which is a public school, or even if it's a private university, that program is approved for postgraduate work. You can check it online. There's a website by IRCC where you can check the school, whether it's eligible for postgraduate work permit, and if it's a private college or university, whether a specific program is eligible, okay? So if somebody's offering you a program, make sure you go to this website. You can reach out to us. I can't really type it out right now on the live, but those programs are available. So to answer your question, you're looking at a 3-year postgraduate work permit. Let's look at some other questions. So Alex is saying, have you heard about any public policy application which was declined? If so, for what reason? So far, nothing. Okay, so either we don't know anybody who's been refused, or right now we haven't received any feedback from our clients. Okay, so we're in touch with many other immigration companies. So far, there's no feedback. I believe it's all under process. In the next 2-3 months, that's when I think you can expect some feedback on responses in terms of having an acknowledgement of your permanent residency application being in process, meeting the eligibility criteria, or being refused or sent back due to incompleteness or ineligibility. We're going to look at some other questions here. Do pathways work for master's degrees in Canada? Depends on the, yeah. So somebody's asking, do English or language pathway programs for master's degree, do they exist? Do they work? Is it something valid? Yes, many universities, institutions have pathway programs for universities. So let's say you don't have your IELTS or TOEFL, right? You want to study university like a master's in BC, Ontario, or anywhere else, okay? And you need to do a pathway. Yes, there's partner schools, or the university itself has that option available, where you study the language and gradually move towards the academic program without writing the exam for IELTS or TOEFL. So yes, they do exist. It's not just colleges. Universities also have it. Their requirements are different. Maybe the pricing sometimes is different, but it depends which province, what subject. If you have any questions on that, reach out to us. Obviously, we have a dedicated education department. They will give you every single program there is, because we're helping a lot of people come and study in Canada, and a lot of them are through pathway. Not everybody has their IELTS or TOEFL, right? What is the minimum tuition? So Mangir Sisevil 209 is asking, what is the minimum tuition for 2 years of graphic design program? It's a very general question, but I would say that depending on the college, there's the potential of anywhere from $14,000 up to $17,000 for college tuition per year, right? So let's say you're looking at the lowest I would say you could find is 12, 13,000, and the highest would be 17,000. Take an average, I guess that's 15,000, and that's per year. So multiply that by 2, okay? If it's a 2-year program, like you mentioned, okay? But don't quote me on this, because that's a very general question. It depends on which province, what college, what institution. Is it a private college? I can even get you something at $4,500. Okay, but it's a private college. You're not eligible for postgraduate work permit. But if you really insist, that's possible too. So the spectrum is across the board. So that means you can find really cheap private colleges. Public colleges are more expensive, but again, there's a range. Okay, so Rainier El Lesna. I hope I'm horrible with names, everybody. So 8 months program in DLI. How many years PGWP can you have? 8 months. So if you study 8 months and it's an 8-month degree, you will get an 8-month work permit. If it's 2 semesters and it's a 1-year degree or diploma or certificate, you're eligible for a 1 year. And in case you're already studying and you want to get a longer work permit postgraduate, then you just continue and don't apply for your work permit after you graduate. You just study for another 1 year degree and then apply for a postgraduate work permit, because it's a combination of 1 year plus 1 year equals 2 years. But if you're just doing an 8-month degree, just 8 months, it'll be an 8-month work permit. But again, remember, 2 semesters, and if it's a diploma and it says 1 year, you'll be eligible for 1 year. So you have to be careful with that, okay? Let's look at some other questions. So Dancer Ubiano, that's a cool name. Estudio de 2 años o me el PGWP e de 6 años. Okay, I'm not Spanish, but I've dealt with enough Spanish clients to know that she's asking, if I study for a 2-year program, will I get a postgraduate work permit of 2 years or 3 years? And folks, I did not use Google Translate. So you'll get a 3-year postgraduate work permit, okay? You will get a 3-year if you studied full-time in a 2-year accredited program. Okay, so remember, if your school is not eligible for postgraduate work permit, like a private college or university, that specific program is not eligible, then you won't be able to apply for any postgraduate work permit. But if you were studying at a public college or university or a private university that has a specific program eligible for postgraduate, then a 2-year program, as long as you met the requirements, is eligible for a 3-year postgraduate work permit. Okay. Oh wow, there's more Spanish. Okay, Dancer Ubiano. Okay, same person. CA un diploma o career de menos de 2 años el PGWP de solo por un año. Okay, that one I'll need Google Translate. So that means something about a career 2-year postgraduate with a 1 year. Yeah, I'm not sure. Sorry. What I'll do is can you message us afterwards in Spanish, okay? And I will check with my colleagues and will reply to you, because that one is too long for me to understand, as I said. But Dancer Ubiano, message us directly on Instagram. I'll reply to you. I'll get some help, okay? Miguel Hernandez is asking, IRCC mentioned TR to PR applications don't qualify to get a BOWP. Will that change? It depends. Right now, it's very vague. So we don't know either. We have to wait for instructions from the Canadian government. Okay. Basically, it's very difficult to maintain status if so either they're processing the PR super fast, or they have to allow the bridging open work permit, right? But unfortunately, right now, there's no more clarity on that. Yes, no problem, Dancer Ubiana, no problem. Don't worry. I have to learn Spanish. Okay. So message us. I'll reply to you on that. So we're live, everybody. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Post your message here. We're here every Tuesday, 9 a.m., 5 p.m. North America Standard Eastern Time. So that's like Toronto, New York, Montreal. Those are the times. So Planetisha, okay, that's an easy name for me. She's asking, or he's asking, for TR to PR pathway, essential non-healthcare, how many hours a student can count? And also, can they count experience gained on implied status? Implied status, yes, it counts. As a student, okay, that's a tricky question, because many immigration companies are saying yes right now. Why are they saying yes? Is because there's no specifics about the work experience. As long as you have valid status in South Canada, they say your work experience counts. Based on this, many immigration companies have come and said, yes, it's possible that you're a student, you're working, and you've gained that 1 year work experience in a non-essential non-healthcare essential occupation to be eligible. Personally, we cannot advise you on that because there's no clarity. We have requested the Canadian government to respond to our question. I believe by July we should know whether a student gaining work experience as a student will count for the international worker stream, non-healthcare essential worker. However, based on what everybody's saying, they're saying yes. We cannot advise you right now on that because there's not enough clarity. Implied status, if it allows you, like if you are extending your work permit or converting from a student to a worker, implied status work experience does count. But if you're a student and you've extended it and you're waiting for your new study permit, or you were, that again falls back into that education, working as a full-time student question, which we're waiting for clarity in July from the government. We have requested it directly. The Canadian government, thankfully, has a direct mailbox for immigration lawyers and consultants to request clarity. So we have asked this, and we're waiting for 100% confirmation. So Planetisha is saying they're saying 1,560 hours over a period of 12 years in 3 years. Yeah, so it has to be recent. It basically in Canada, right? Because I don't think 12 years, because most people wouldn't have status as a worker 12 years in Canada. But in the last 3 years, yes. So you should have accumulated that for the essential non-health care. However, regarding being a student, we cannot advise you whether it's eligible or not. The government has not clarified, but we will have clarity in July. If you're in that situation, reach out to us early July. We should have a written answer from the Canadian government. Okay. Let's see other questions. What do I do if I myself or myself? Okay, it says, what do I do if my studies finish before my study permit expires? Well, if your studies finish before the study permit expires, so let's say you graduated today, your study permit shows that it's valid till, I don't know, August. the day you receive your graduation letter, okay, like a confirmation writing that you have graduated and completed, as of that day, you're not allowed to work or study anymore because you're not a student anymore, okay? If you're still studying, that's a different question. But if your study permit expires later, it's not valid. So you cannot stay basically based on the study permit and continue working. So you either need to convert to a postgraduate work permit if you're eligible, or if you're continuing to study, renew your study permit. Or if you have neither of those options, convert to a visitor visa. So the IRCC, the immigration regulations state that either the day you finish your graduation, right, 90 days after you graduate, or the date of your study permit expires, that's when your status expires. It doesn't mean you can actually study up to 90 days after you graduate or work after you graduate. It actually means your status. So you don't need to keep your status valid after 90 days after the graduation date or before by the date of when the study permit expires. So it's a little bit tricky. So if you graduated and your study permit is valid for another 2 months, you have status, but you cannot study or work, okay, as soon as you receive the graduation confirmation. So you have status inside the country, but it's relatively useless. You can't study or work. So be careful with that. It's tricky. I understand. Sometimes it's difficult to understand. So we have a dancer. Is that? No. We have, I'm looking at the old questions. Sorry about that. Good. No more questions. No, I'm just kidding. So can I work while I'm waiting for my study permit extension? So that's an excellent question. You're here, you're studying, it's expiring, your program is continuing, right? Because your study permit has finished or is finishing before your program is finishing. So you can continue to work, okay, as long as you apply for a study permit renewal and you meet the eligibility criteria before the expiry date. But you can only work part-time if you're still studying. And if it's an academic holiday, you can work full-time, okay? But be careful here. If you finished a program, let's say 1 year, and you're continuing to another 1 year program, there's a gap, from the date you graduate from that first program, you have an official, you cannot work. So you cannot work during that gap when your new study permit comes in to start the second program. If it's the same program, it's a different matter. Okay, so you have to be careful about that. So Daniela, one of her colleagues, is asking if my ex-husband is not in Canada. I think she means somebody else. She's asking on behalf of somebody else. If my ex-husband is not in Canada, he needs to sign a form on behalf of my minor son to apply for PR. Yes, custodianship, so the authorization is required by both guardians. So if both parents are there and one of the parents wants to bring the child over to Canada, the Canadian government is very, very sensitive about this. They're very careful. They need to authorize the child. So they have to give legal permission from the home country, from the parent who's there, to allow that child to come to Canada, apply for permanent residency, unless the child reaches an age of where they're an adult, okay, like 19 years old. But before that, when they're a minor, you cannot, as a single parent, like as one parent, say, oh, I want to bring my child over. I don't care if my ex-husband, wife, or whoever doesn't allow them. You will not be able to bring them. Okay, that's a fact. So Honia Hissam is asking, if someone comes to Canada as an international student and doesn't want to study for the program that was chosen for just international students and continues for the last job as an interior designer, is it allowed? That's an interesting question. So you come to Canada as an international student, right? And you don't want to study the program that you chose for international and continue for the last job as an intern. Okay, so if I understand, you can switch programs in schools. That's allowed. But you cannot not study and just work, because that's not allowed, and obviously that will create problems for you. Okay, so if you come to Canada and you are supposed to study interior design, like let's say accounting, but you switch your program in your school to interior design, that's allowed, as long as you have to be careful about that gap in between the programs. But if you're also coming here and you switch schools, as long as the other schooler has a designated learning institution number, you have to notify the government when you do the transfer. But if you don't study and you just work or don't do anything, that's a problem. That's not allowed. Okay. Don't worry about me, because I won't report you. But in general, the Canadian government, that will be out of status, and you would have problems later on trying to convert for PR. Okay, so again, everybody, the Canadian government last week announced a temporary policy for construction workers to out of status to apply for permanent residency has been reopened. There's a cap. There's certain eligibility criteria. So if you or anybody you know is in that position, it is an excellent program for out-of-status construction workers to apply for permanent residency. Again, very specific eligibility. There's a cap. I believe typically it's 5,000, but I have to check my notes. And again, if there's no more questions, we're going to sign off today. We will be back here at 5 p.m. Eastern time here, answering your questions live with my colleagues here in the office. Again, we're Ingwe Immigration. We're here every Tuesday, and today's a beautiful day, so make sure you enjoy it. And if you're back home in your own country, I'm sure it's always a beautiful day, right? Thanks, everybody. It was really nice seeing everybody online. We will be back 5 p.m. today. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.